Hello, I'm Rachel from Echidna Sewing, and today we'll be looking at different methods of quilting. When you begin your patchwork journey, it's very likely that you'll make a patchwork quilt top, something like this. There's 3 layers that create a quilt. The finished patchwork quilt top, which is your first layer. The second layer is the quilt batting, and this is a layer of insulation between the top and the back. I've used this product as my batting of choice for all my quilts in the past 28 years. This is a wool polyester batting which has a high loft, which means the quilting shows up, it washes and wears well, and it's easy to quilt on my domestic sewing machine. The backing fabric is the bottom layer of fabric that covers the batting, and the backing fabric can be a whole piece of cloth, a piece backing, but mostly a good quality quilting cotton works well. The 3 of these elements together are called a quilt sandwich and are secured together using a process known as basting. The type of basting you choose will depend on the type of quilting that is planned. And the saying goes, it's not a quilt until it's quilted. So let's have a look at the quilting options I have for you. There's 5. The first of which is sending the quilt top to a long arm quilter who would load the 3 layers onto the frame and quilt it together. This is lovely if you're in a rush to complete the quilt, or if it's simply too large for you to comfortably manage with your domestic sewing machine. The 4 other options are quilting by hand, and here's a beautiful hand quilted quilt here with the hoop. Quilting with your embroidery machine, a different type of hoop, but in the hoop quilting. Walking foot quilting, using a walking foot, and free motion quilting using free motion feet. The next step is for me to look at a specific quilt and start planning and show you how to do that. One of the things that you need to do prior to starting to quilt is to make sure that there's no loose threads on your quilt top, and I can see here that there are, so I'm just trimming them off. And this is an I Spy quilt with 9 different rectangles that I'm going to use to show you how to quilt with your embroidery machine, free motion quilt, and use a walking foot to stitch through the sashing. I probably wouldn't use the 3 different methods on this quilt, but I want to show you how you can achieve those things with these different fabrics. The other thing I need to talk about is why my quilt sandwich here is so wide from the edge of the quilt all the way through to the batting and backing. And that is because I may use quilting with my embroidery machine on the borders, and so to do that I need space to hoop. And you can see if I needed to hoop up this area, I would need to have this extra space, which is why the batting and the batting and backing is so much bigger. If I was just using walking foot or free motion quilting, this would just be cut straight to this edge. But because I'm combining all these elements for you in this video, then this is why I have made my quilt sandwich in this way. So don't forget, planning is really important. You can take a picture, draw on the picture, get ideas in your head for what you want to do, but the idea is to think about what you want to achieve with your quilt sandwich prior to quilting. So let me clear off the table, grab my machine. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to quilt with your embroidery machine. Using your embroidery machine to quilt, there are some differences that you do need to understand. I already explained to you why I have the bigger gap from the outside edge of the quilt and the batting and backing, so that is larger for hooping. The other thing I'm going to talk about is your hoop size. So whenever I'm quilting with my embroidery machine, I always use the largest hoop that I possibly can, and the reason that I do that is because it enables me to easily line up my block into the middle of the hoop. The next thing, I use any sort of thread for quilting with my embroidery machine. I will use a poly cotton, I'll use a hemming with embroidery thread, I'll use 100% cotton if it matches what I'm trying to quilt or if it's in contrast to what I'm trying to quilt. So it's really about the colours rather than the type of thread. I have for this quilt wound a bobbin, and you can see this is my backing fabric. I have wound machine embroidery thread onto the back, and it's in a blue tone, and I've got about half a dozen of those already pre-wound, so I have done that because the whole of this quilt top, even when I'm doing the walking foot quilting or free motion, I will use the Hemingworth thread. And today I am using Hemingworth Paprika. I just wanted to show you that this was the type of thread I'm using. The next thing you need to understand is hooping. So with my brother hoop here, I'm really lucky because I can unwind it quite a way out, and I do this, and that kind of hinge allows me to do that. And then I will tend to hoop it, so I'm thinking about the inside arm here, so that where the hoop slides on, which is this way, the bulk of the quilt is. So I've got the bulk of the quilt to the right. So I've undone my screw as far as it will go without coming apart. Then I'm going to slip this underneath. And then this is where it's all feel. So then using my inner hoop, which is here, I will slide my outer hoop underneath because I'm aiming to hoop up the strawberry. And I'm just going to get it as close as I can and as straight as I can into here and just essentially push down. Push my hoop into place. It does take probably not a lot of muscle, but the key is opening up that screw, and then I've just lifted it up slightly and pushed into each corner. The next thing is I'm going to have a look here. I'm going to finger tighten, and that is really firm. I do not need to tighten that anymore. I'm fairly happy, although my strawberry is not quite square, and I can tell because here is the centre of my hoop, so it's a bit further down than I wanted it to be. So I'm actually going to unhoop that and take the top off and move it up. Now, I could use my technology on my machine to navigate down, but I just wanted to show you how easy it was to unhoop and rehoop. Because when you're quilting with your embroidery machine, that's what you do. You unhoop and rehoop a lot. I'm actually going the wrong way, so just push my inner hoop up because I want this to be in the middle of my strawberry, so you can see these two cross pieces. And again, that's pretty good. I just push that down. The other thing that probably is good to understand is that the reason that I use basting spray is because when you're quilting with your embroidery machine, the tension the embroidery hoop itself puts onto the quilt sandwich means it's wrinkle-free at the back. So if you're basting by using safety pins or by hand or machine basting, you have to make sure your backing is really taut, whereas the hoop from an embroidery machine makes sure that that backing is taut and that there's no wrinkles, and it will hoop easily. It will stitch easily without any wrinkles. So the hooping is done. The next thing I want to talk about is your design selection. So you can buy a lot of in the hoop machine embroidery designs. Today I'm actually using one of our Echidna red work designs called My Valentine, because I wanted to show you that you can use a simple design like a red work design to stitch on something like this, which works just as well. You don't have to use a specialised quilting design, but it is quite good to use some of the designs that you might have in your stash. So if you've got some redwork designs and they are not too densely stitched, then they'll work well. You don't want to use a design that's a satin stitch finish or anything like that, because that will be too dense for your quilting. So redwork designs work really well. As of course, if you've got a stash of quilting designs, you can use those too. So I'm going to load my hoop on now. I'm going to do it from the back. So I've slid the hoop on. Probably can see that here. I'm just going to lock it into position. And as I said before, the bulk of my weight is here. And I'll just kind of roll this up. But when I'm quilting with my embroidery machine, I'm going to tell you I never leave this unattended. So let me just check the design and we'll start stitching. So I have got my Valentine embroidery designs loaded from a USB. I'm going to select the heart to medium, set it, choose embroidery. And before I stitch, and I would do this every time, I'm going to see where my top and bottom is, and it's too far down. I can see that it's too low. So I need to, the sides are fine if I go across both sides. The sides are fine. So I'm kind of auditioning my design, but I now need to go back and I need to move the design up. And again, I will do the same process. Choose embroidery, check my layout again, top left corner, going to go bottom left corner, and it's a heart. I know the design's going to go out like that, so I'll go back to the top, center, side. And I'm really happy with that positioning, so I shall put my foot down. I've got my thread loaded, my bobbin threads in. I'll press start. One thing that's really important that I need to share with you is I'm going to go into my machine settings and I'm going to adjust my embroidery foot height up. I'm going to do it one increment first, but that is, you're not going to know this until you start it again. This is on a Brother machine, but this foot should be skimming the top of the quilt sandwich, which is better, so it's slightly above the sandwich. If it's touching too much, you will get thread breakages, maybe broken needles. Okay, so that is our first machine embroidery design completed. I'm not sure if you can see, but if I rub my hand on there, the batting has lofted really nicely and it's just plumped up a little, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do. So I've finished quilting with my embroidery machine, and you can see this lovely heart is completed, and I went on and I've quilted some more blocks with my embroidery machine just so that I've got a couple of blocks quilted for this quilt. The next step for me is using my walking foot to do some quilting, and I've decided in my planning that I'm going to go ahead and find any straight line. So here's that one here, and there's a yellow one up here. I think maybe the green ones here. I'm pretty sure I'm going to stitch those straight lines with my walking foot, and I'm also going to stitch through these sashings. A walking foot, as you can see, I have 4 here and they're quite different. So the machine is now set up with the move it foot on, and that's the one I'll be using in the video today. But you can also just get like a general walking foot that looks like this. The dynamic walking foot, which is a walking foot that you can use with decorative stitches. Normally would only use a walking foot for straight stitches. And then this is a walking foot, and I've put the guide on it. So if you're going to do a lot of straight lines, the guide is really useful. So let me just put these away. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the threads. So I'm still carrying on stitching my quilt with the Hemingway thread. So like I said, with the machine embroidering, I will use any thread that matches my quilt. So whether it's cotton or embroidery thread or a poly cotton, whatever matches is what I use. So that's the first thing, and I'll pop those aside because I'm going to be stitching through this blue sashing with my blue thread. The last thing is needles. So when I was quilting with my embroidery machine, I just used my standard embroidery 7511 needle. For this sewing with my move it foot, I've actually changed it to a universal needle size 1280. So needle, the other thing I'm changing is my stitch length. So I like to start with a stitch length of 3 for quilting. Now I pretty much stay around there. It's very rare that I would change that, but I am starting with a 3. Sometimes if I want it to stand out more, I might use a 3.5 to 4, but for the most part I'm using 3. So you can see here the throat of my machine that I actually have to roll up my quilt in here so I can have easy access to the sashing. And I'm only going to do one side. I wouldn't normally do that. I'd normally do them all, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you, I'm going to stitch in the ditch, or as close as I can. In the ditch actually means in the seam. So in the ditch down the whole length so that I am able to secure my quilt sandwich. The other thing I'm going to do before I start is bring my bobbin thread up. You might not be able to see that because it's a very, very good match. I'm just going to try and grab that. There it is. And that means by doing that, I won't have any tangles in the bottom. So I've left quite a long tail, both of those here and under the foot, and we'll be able to start. And I'll actually tie those off. So if I was at home, I probably would have a bigger table, but I'm here in the studio, so I have to make do with what I've got. So the idea is to hold the quilt and guide as we're stitching it. I use a slow and steady pace. In fact, I'm going to slow it down. So a walking foot is made for just that, for walking. It's not what I call a running foot. So I'm going to concentrate on what I'm looking at here. And so you can see the needle is following this little pink sashing. Just going to stitch it down. And the walking foot is actually feeding really well through, I should say the move it foot because that's what it is. I actually have the pivot on, so I'm taking that off so the sandwich is always engaged. And as I drive down, the next thing I'm going to do is have a brief look here, if I can. No, I can't, so I'll go a little bit further and see how well it's stitching. Because if I don't like it, I will actually stop and unpick it and try something else. But I think that looks really good, so I'm going to carry on. Okay, so 3 stitches off the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thread up again, so I'm not actually going to cut or use the cutting mechanism. I'm going to probably cut it now, and then I'll be able to pull this thread up from here. So I'm pulling the bobbin thread up, and I'll be able to tie that back in and sew it off once I do the other one. Don't know if you can see that. So that is one side of that sashing done. It looks good. Got a little bit crooked. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. So I'm now going to go and do the other side. Make a longer tail again. Same process. And then, as I said before, I would do the whole lot. But because I want to show you some other things, I'm only going to do these two parts of the sashing. So again, foot down, bobbin thread up, long tail, and I'll just start again. So this time I'm working on the right. So I'm actually taking, if I was also at home, probably one thing that I did forget to mention is I would have my quilting table. So I have a bigger, wider table, which would give me more support here at the front. So I'm actually using my hands. If I had a quilting table, I would be using that. So again, just stitching down the sashing and the frame, this block at a slow and steady pace. The magic of the foot, you can see, is just feeding the quilt layers through without any puckering, and it feeds both layers at the same time. So the whole sandwich. So the feed dogs work in cahoots with the foot, which is why I love using a walking foot. It's a really great option for quilting. Again, I'm going to pull my thread through. I'll cut the thread here so it gives me long tails. The next thing I'm going to look at is which blocks I'm going to quilt first. So I have a lot of straight lines here, and I think I'm going to thread up with white and stitch through these lines to quilt it down. So in making the decisions for how to quilt this, I've looked at my fabric and let it speak to me, and it's got, these are straight lines, you know what, I'm going to do walking foot quilting here. So let me change my thread to white. So I'm changing my top thread. I have blue underneath, so I'll just quickly change this, and then I'll start working on the pause block. My machine likes the quilt sandwich to be away from the presser foot when it's threading, so I just had to remove it. Okay, so with the pause block, the first thing I'm going to do is stitch through these lines. So I'm going to start probably in the centre, one again, and long tail. I'm going to pull that foot down, bring my bobbin thread up. There it is. Tweezers are really useful for that function. So I'll just put my foot down again, and I'm going to go stitch all the way down here, a straight line. And to be honest, this fabric, it's not a straight line, so it is going to be forgiving if my driving's a little crooked. And that's why I like using fabric as the template for what I'm stitching. It just makes it more forgiving. In the whole scheme of things, you don't notice that it's not perfect. So I've left the long tails again. Now moving to this part. Going to have to tackle the tweezer problem again. Let me do that. You need to do it when it's right at the beginning of where you're going to start as well. I took the foot off this time. But if you're doing a lot of straight stitching, best to have a pair of tweezers if your machine cuts your bobbin thread short, which mine tends to do. So go down here. And I'm pretty much just guiding the quilt on the white, so I'm just agitating it slightly, but not too much, just to keep the needle and the thread, because I'm using white thread, off the black. And for this one, I'm going to go up here, because I can, and spin around and go back down. Again, just moving the sandwich round so that I can see that the needle stays on the white and I'm not going on the black or the pink. And I'm going to twist it all the way back this way, so I've got the bulk of the sandwich in here. I'm going to have to travel a little bit to complete. And because I'm going to stop on the same spot, I'm just going to lock and then cut that one. Then I have, I'm going to actually pull this long tail out now, show you a different method for you to get a long tail. And I'm not cutting it this time, I'm just pulling this up. So these are different methods that you can use to get a long tail if you don't have the tools available. When you have a machine that has the ability to cut, it will actually create a short tail. You might not like that. You might not like to sew the threads in, but you do you, and find out what way you like to stitch best, but this is the way I've done it. Here's my really long tail coming through. Perfect. That's the longest tail. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on now and stitch through this block, and then we'll change to yellow thread and do the yellow block. So you're probably wondering why we have all these long tails, and I wanted to get a few before I told you why. One of the things that can happen when you're quilting, and you might not like this if you have a machine that cuts, is that you can have short trims at the back and it looks messy and you think it's going to take a long time to clean it up or to trim them off, or that it's not going to be secure enough stitching. So by creating the long tails, you can tie the ends in a knot and stitch the threads through to make sure that it's a secure finish. That's the reason, but you don't have to. I can do the next couple to show you how to do it without a long tail, and that will just give you a short cut at the back of your quilt, about half a centimetre, sorry, about half an inch. But that's okay, you just have to trim those off. Either way, there's work to do to finish, of either sewing the threads through to lock off your long tails, or to lock. So if you're just going to start with a short thread and not with a long tail, I'd put my foot down. You could use a lock stitch if you want, but I actually just hold my needle in place for about 3 stitches, and then I just stitch again, just making sure that I'm guiding the quilt sandwich past the black, so I'm staying on the white. Around. This is the same as the centre block. Oh, drove out of alignment slightly there, but I recovered. And you know, if 1 or 2 stitches is out of alignment, you're not really going to notice it. So don't worry too much as you're stitching if you find that one's slightly wonky. And again, pull this all the way through. And there's that short top thread just here. Might not be able to see it, but I can just trim that off because I've locked it, and I know that I have, and I'm going to finish on a lock as well, just by holding my sewing machine, my presser foot, and my hands firmly on the sandwich to hold it in place. Cut, foot up, no long tail. So I think I've got this side to do, so we'll start from here, and then that is that block completed for the walking foot quilting I want to do. We'll go back and start up here. And you can see if I don't want to hand sew my threads through, it's actually quicker to lock and then stitch. And I keep moving my quilt around, as you can see, so that I am working with the easiest way to handle the quilt. So that's a feel thing, and you kind of get to know that the more that you quilt. Oh, I'll move it this way because I'm right-handed, or I'm stronger in my left arm, whatever reason, you just get your own rhythm. Okay, so this is that block finished. I've got a few tails to sew in. You can see how the walking foot has puffed up that fabric. And one thing I will also contribute is that sometimes more quilting is better than less. So this does take a lot of time, maybe longer than it took you to piece the whole quilt top together. But take your time and relax and do it. The last thing I'm going to show you, so the last type of quilting, is free motion. And we're going to work on these gorgeous little dogs. So I'm going to grab all those feet and some threads and show you how to do that. Okay, so I've reset the machine and I have put my open toe free motion foot on. There are a couple of other options of feet that you can get free motion with this talier. There's this one, which is a tiny, tiny hole, but it's quite a fine foot, so it's really good for getting into really small places. And this is actually one of my favourite feet because it holds the sandwich down as you're stitching. But today we're using the open toe because there's a lot of images here, and this foot's great for me because I can see where I'm driving. The changes in the setup of the machine is I'm really lucky. I have a machine where I can just drop my feed dogs with a press of a button, but you may have a machine that has feed dogs at the back, but you do need to drop them for successful free motion quilting. I have bought my bobbin thread to the top, and essentially I am going to stipple in the background, so the black of this rectangle, so that this flamingo pops. So probably the first thing that I will do is just maybe go around the outside or the shape of the flamingo, just so I have a defined area, and also so that he pops more. And so the free motion foot allows me, you can see, to determine where I'm driving, but it also means that I am determining the stitch length by how hard I push the sandwich. If I go really slow, my stitch length will be longer. If I go really fast, I'll get a short stitch length. So this is definitely a feel type of quilting, but once you find your rhythm and get into it, it's lots of fun. So I'm going to start on the flamingo's glasses here. I'm just going to hold my top thread. I've already bought my, and I'm going to push my sandwich, and I'm using, you can see where I'm driving, but the beauty of this foot is I can go to the inside here and down. In fact, I'm just going to remove that thread. You can snip it off because I did lock. Pull it through, and I'm following the image of the flamingo, so I'm going to go down, and I am just pushing and pulling the sandwich with my hands. So I'm just going around the outside, and then I stop. I'll just adjust this slightly, and then I'm going to go down his leg. So I'm defining the area where I'm going to stipple. Sometimes using quilting gloves is great for free motion quilting. We also have a quilting grip, which is really useful if you're finding the weight of the sandwich, because I can feel there's a bit of drag on here now. So I'm just going to pull that up to make sure more of the weight is up here, so that where I'm stitching is not so heavy, so it drags, and I can go back to a finer stipple because I've noticed that my stipples got wider. But really, this is just practice, practice, practice. So we are just flattening this black background behind Mr. Flamingo. And I'm going to sneak up here without, and carry on without having to cut. And again, just trying to get my shape. Now I'll go around this side of Mr. Flamingo, so I'm going straight round the design. I'm going to be honest, I find some ways it's easier for me to stipple right than left, and I think it's because I'm right-handed, but you kind of just get a feel for it and a preference. It's kind of cute. And it's faster than walking foot quilting if you prepared to take the time and not be too critical of yourself and master the technique. Practice, practice, practice. And I've got one flamingo foot up here, so we'll get that to pop on my little black sandwich. And we're almost done. And I'm pretty much going to end up where I started. And the other thing you'll notice is there's no stopping and starting, it was all in the same spot. Okay, so you can see with that free motion quilting, Mr. Flamingo is really sticking out. If I really wanted to, I could free motion through to here, but I want to get to the dogs, so I'm not going to do that today. So let's get to the dogs. These are the guys I really love. Aren't they cute? So sometimes when you're free motion quilting, you get a fabric that just speaks of, oh, we should try and copy you. See this little guy? So I'm going to attempt my free motion skills to copy this lady's lovely hair. I'm going to pull my thread up. So I'm going to use the fabric as my directions on quilting. So here we go. So start with just do a couple of short stitches. You notice if I don't push the sandwich, it just stitches in place. So it's up to me to get up to this ear. And then down to here. So I'm just highlighting this gorgeous dog's face. I'm hoping to highlight this gorgeous dog's face and crazy hair that it has. And this takes longer. You can hear by the machine that I'm actually going quite a bit slower, because what I'm trying to do is have a look and see where the pattern is while I'm stitching. And I'm not worrying if I miss it because I'm going back to another spot. And I've got this thread here, so I'll just trim that off so I can see again. That's my bottom and top thread. Again, I locked it on by stitching in place, so I know it's not a problem. And there's that one. So then I'm just going to travel back here and try and get round this beautiful face, which I think I've done quite successfully, and then down to his body. And so I'm just doing the black, I'm not doing the pink, and I'm trying to get to the spots that I can. And then I'm moving on to this little dog at the side. So he's kind of got dreadlocky hair, and I like that. Makes it, you know, a little easier to free motion because I'm not worrying about a face. But you can see this is really good fun for free motion outlining, and this fabric is perfect. I'm going to go down here to this guy, and he's got a little hair set here. We'll go here. So there's lots and lots of fun you can have if you let your fabric talk to you, or if you just look at what's on your fabric and go, you know what, I could probably free motion quilt that. So then you don't have to come up with ideas on how to make it look good. And I'm not sure if I've done them justice, but let's stop and have a look and see. Because this is going to take a long time for me to do this. There they are. I think it looks fantastic. So my top tips for you with walking foot quilting and free motion quilting. Walking foot quilting first is use a walking foot to do lots of straight lines. It's great. Stitch through your sashing. Your stitch length should be 3, and use whatever thread matches your fabrics. Don't worry if it's not 100% cotton or if it's not a poly cotton. Just, I find if you use the thread that matches, you get a really, really good quilting result. With free motion, don't beat yourself up too much about whether it looks perfect or not. You can see I just traced around the lines of the dog, and I think it looks really cute. So just be brave. Drop your feed dogs for free motion. Use an open toe foot because then you can see where you're driving, and relax and have fun. I hope you've really enjoyed learning about these different quilting techniques, and I'm going to carry on stitching my dogs, and I will see you soon in the next video.